Hello everyone, I'm Sam and I talk about my experience as a queer person with chronic illness. If that sounds like something you want to hear more about, then please do click subscribe. Today I'll be talking about my experience of getting a cervical screening as a trans man. I'll be talking a bit about why we need them and what they're even checking for, but I'll also kind of, in as much detail as I'm comfortable sharing, talk about what it was like to actually go through the process. For many transmasculine people, the idea of a cervical screening, otherwise known as a smear test as well, can be incredibly daunting. Heck, most cis women would say the same thing. It's not exactly the most fun and exciting thing to have to go and do. And it's definitely not helped by the fact that there's this huge stigma about it and loads of people refuse to even talk to each other about doing it. Even when I was getting my HPV vaccine at 15, no one was really talking much about what it meant and the implications going forwards either. It was all just really quiet. So let's talk some more about cervical screenings and I'll tell you what my experience was like. First of all, what even is a cervical screening and why do we need them? In the UK, if you have a cervix, you'll get invited to have a cervical screening at the age of 25. You'll then be required to have further screenings every 3 years. The screenings are looking for HPV, which stands for the human papillomavirus. The virus itself is actually quite common, it's just when the cells turn abnormal that it can become cancerous, and that's something that you need to look out for. We have cervical screenings to detect these abnormal cells and to try and stop them from becoming cancerous if possible. So how do you get a cervical screening if you are a transmasculine person? This really depends as to what you've got listed down on your medical records. If you're still down as female, you'll get invited around 6 months before your 25th birthday. If you're down as male, however, you won't get this letter and it is entirely up to you to get this arranged. This means that many people might not even realise that they need this test and never get the prompts to actually go and get it done. Up until recently, it was recommended that anybody who was transmasc or male on their medical records should go and get their cervical screenings done at a specialist clinic. There was a bit of an issue essentially where certain labs, when they saw a male gender marker on the test that got sent to them, they assumed it was an error and they would literally bin the test. Now, I don't know this for sure, but I believe it might have changed recently because I've been seeing a lot of advertisements from my local council that actually included transmasculine people and said that they should go and get tested if possible. I'm not 100% sure if that means that it's okay to get it done at the GP and you won't face any issues, but I'm sure if you talk to your GP about it, they'll know what to advise. If you're in London though and you don't want to chance it, there is a clinic called 56T. It's in the same place as Trans Plus, which some of you might have heard of. It's essentially kind of like a pilot being run of a type of GIC, but it's also a sexual health clinic that's there for trans people. One of the services that you can get there is a cervical screening, and all of the nurses there are really trained, really understand sort of trans people and the difficulties that you can face with things such as cervical screenings. So I do really recommend going there. They'll also make sure that your test, when it gets to a lab, won't completely get scrapped and you will definitely get your results. And this is where I'm going to base my experience off of, as that is where I went. So what's it like getting a cervical screening? So I can only really speak from my experience, although I understand that on a general note, it all goes quite similarly. As I mentioned, I booked my cervical screening with 56T, which is in Soho. At the very start of my appointment, my nurse asked me what my pronouns were and how I was actually feeling about the appointment. For me personally, I didn't feel too bad, to be honest. I knew that it was something that I was going to have to get done for quite a while now, so I was kind of over it. I also already educated myself quite a lot on what the process was like, so I knew what to expect and I knew that it was going to be over really quickly. She then explained what the screening actually entails and what the next steps are depending on the results. One thing that I really liked was that the nurse told me that if I walked away from that appointment having not had my screening, it was perfectly fine and I could always come back another time. Whilst I personally didn't really need that reassurance because I knew I was going to go through with it on that day, I imagine that if I was someone who walked in and was really nervous about the whole thing, hearing that would have felt really good. And I think it's something that's really important to remember, is that ultimately you're in control and it's okay if you get there and decide that actually you can't do it that day. Next up, I was told to take all of my bottom layers off and to sit on the bed in the position that was instructed. Now this is where my biggest conundrum struck. Do you or do you not take your socks off? I decided to take them off because I was wearing like thick ski style socks and I feel like it would just be really ridiculous if I was basically half naked but had these socks on. But then in hindsight, I think I realised that it's actually kind of a lot weirder that I was there with my bare feet than if I just kept my socks on. So, you know, use your own judgment on that one. So once I was actually stuck there, the nurse kind of showed me the speculum, all the bits and bobs that she'd be using, explained it all a little bit, and the thing that she told me, which I thought was really great, was that I was in the driver's seat. She was going to go ahead with the examination, but if at any point I wanted to slow down, stop, if anything hurt, I could always say that. I could always stop it from going any further at any point that I wanted. You get something called a speculum inserted, which essentially goes into your front hole in order to open it up a little bit more so that the nurse can get a clear view of your cervix. They do have a smaller size available, but they kind of go with a medium as a standard, and then it can always switch out if it's needed. I personally found the medium fine. It was a bit weird, but I didn't actually find the whole thing that uncomfortable. Then they take this little brush and they brush your cervix. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I completely expected this to be painful. The whole time when I was thinking about the screening, that was what I was dreading. I just thought that it was going to horrifically hurt, and I really, really didn't want it. But in actual reality, it didn't hurt at all. It was just a really weird feeling. Like, it kind of felt like someone was sort of scrubbing something on the inside of me, which, to be fair, is exactly what was happening. After that, all my layers were back on and it was over. The actual test couldn't have taken longer than like a minute or two, and probably would have actually been shorter if I wasn't such a chatty person. I then treated myself to a cookie and a hot chocolate as a congrats to myself for getting it all done. I recommend doing that if you can. So that was it. The only other thing that I would add is that I personally bought a pad with me just on the off chance that I would start to bleed. I actually didn't really, like there was a bit of blood, but it wasn't like a bleed. But that's something that you might want to take into consideration, is just being prepared for that. For any of you that might be also wondering, because I'm sure this question might come up, I did pack to the appointment, and then when I got undressed, obviously I just put it aside with my underwear and then I just popped it back in afterwards. So that is something that you can do if that would make you more comfortable. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that this has eased some worries for you and has pushed you forwards to making sure that you will go and get your cervical screening when it's due for you. If you do have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments, or you can DM me on Instagram if you feel it's a bit too personal. It's really important for our health that we go and get these tests done, so let's get chatting about it and make a step towards breaking the stigma. Please like and subscribe if you want to keep updated, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.